Welcome, everyone, back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I wanted to do a solo podcast on a conversation that I have with literally every single person that I work with, both through the lens of transformation coaching, but then oftentimes in emails and through that physical and bioenergetic lens when I'm working with someone. We will also eventually have this conversation as well. Some people are not ready for it, but most of the people I work with are. And so I try to pick and choose when I go into this because, I get a lot of referrals from family members. And sometimes it's a husband who may not be ready to talk about these types of things, but most of the people I work with are. So I want to have a resource for where I can refer people to listen to some deeper thoughts on this. So in this podcast, I've had several guests that discuss the German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge perspective. And the deeper that I get into learning about it and understanding it, the more you really can't turn that lens off. You start to see it in every single person, whether it's someone that you're working with, if you're a practitioner, or if it is somebody in your Facebook feed and is talking about something that they have going on right after they just mentioned this big stressful event in another post. You can really start to see how this is a map for how our body is either doing one of two things. And this is the beauty of GNM, by understanding that your body is either adapting to a stressor, a perceived stressor. Now, this is really important, in psychology and counseling and the nervous system world. We will talk about perceived stressors because something that's stressful to me is not going to be inherently stressful to everyone. There are some things we can agree on, which would be inherently stressful to every single person. Like, a big natural disaster and your home was destroyed and you are now displaced, the death of a loved one, these things, yes, of course, they're inherently stressful. But German New Medicine explains that it is the lens, the perception we see these events through, which of course they can be these big T traumas, but they can also be these little T traumas that happened back when we were developing our identity, or it can even be in our lives now where we are perceiving something to be inherently isolating, as well as it's also acute and totally unexpected. So it doesn't have to be a big T trauma from childhood. But one of the reasons that, or the reason things to become a special biological program is because we perceive them to be those three things I just said: highly acute, unexpected, and isolating. And isolating is a big one. This shows up in my life a lot because I kind of have moved through the world inherently feeling like I didn't fit in, alone, which we can go back to those attachment wounds and childhood wounds, and why we might feel like that. But when you feel this inherent sense of I am alone, nobody's there to support me, I'm different, I don't fit in anywhere, then you're going to be vulnerable to more conflicts. Because in order for something to be a conflict, you have to feel like I am alone and I can't talk to anyone about this. I am isolated. Nobody understands me. And so if you feel like that most of the time, of course, you'll see things as, or your body will go into these special biological programs more often than somebody who feels like they're connected and has a good sense of community and feels close to their family or their partner or their relationships, who makes friends easily, et cetera, et cetera. So back to GNM. GNM is biological. So I mentioned special biological programs. Now, what this basically means is that your body will adapt to things in you, to these conflicts that you perceive biologically, meaning that when something happens that you view to be highly stressful, unexpected, acute, and isolating, your psyche will also activate your brain to make very specific changes to a very specific organ or type of tissue in order to survive or adapt to that stressor. And this is what German New Medicine calls the conflict active phase. Now, this is what is your body adapting to survive. So you're adapting to the stress in your life, more specifically, these specific types of stress. So you could be working with 10 other people on a highly stressful project and it fails. And one person might view it as a personal failure. I am inherently a bad person, or I didn't do a good job, or I'm not good enough. Whereas someone else might have a very strong sense of identity and know that this has nothing to do with their morals, their personal endeavors, and they might not perceive that as a conflict, and therefore they will not have the biological changes to their organs or tissues. And so it does depend on stress, yes, but also your perception of certain types of stress. And when I work with people one-on-one through transformation coaching, we do a lot of somatic work. Somatics are the foundation for how we start to become aware of how our body is adapting to these stressors. And one of these somatic channels is our mind. And our mind is really good at making up stories. Our mind's entire job is to derive meaning from the things that happen in our lives. And so we're doing this constantly. We have a belief about us in relationship to everything out there. We have a belief in relationship of us to our family, a belief of us in reference to the world, of us in reference to where we live, of us in reference to if we're good at sports. Like, you name a topic, your mind will create some sort of belief, some sort of story about you in relationship to that thing. And so everything that happens to us in our lives, we can start to become aware of how our body is making these physical adaptations. And through the lens of nervous system regulation or somatics, we can start to notice, oh, when I feel like this, I start to get these physical sensations. So when I feel attacked, for example, when I feel like someone is criticizing me, I start to notice that my insides start to feel like tight or twisting. Or maybe, when my partner raises their voice at me, I just generally feel like the bottom has dropped out and I am completely frozen and I can't move. And we can start to, my sign just fell. We can start to dissect these physical sensations, not dissect, but just become aware of them and start to explain to ourselves, when I feel this way, when this event happens and I perceive things, when I listen to the story I'm telling myself and I say, oh, I feel like I'm being attacked right now. It could be just your boss giving you a performance review or something that everybody gets done. And it's not a personal attack, but I feel like I'm being personally attacked. And then I can start to feel the physical changes and sensations that happen in my body. We can start to become more aware of these patterns in our life, and we can start to correlate these belief systems, these perceptions, the types of stress that we are experiencing with the adaptations that our body is making. So, for example, if you have a skin condition, you can look up on the learninggnm.com website what specific conflicts are related to specific types of skin conditions. And for example, eczema, which is what I struggled with, that is a separation conflict. And the website, the 5 biological laws, GNM practitioners, They help to explain these two phases, like I mentioned. The first is adaptation. So your body is always either adapting to the stress, and in the separation conflict, the skin will lose skin cells, and the biological reason, there's always a biological reason, is to numb the area so you don't feel the pain of the separation. And when I say there's always a biological reason, it's not like when you experience a separation conflict that then your liver is going to respond in your case. In another person's case, the lungs are going to respond. No. The corresponding organ always makes corresponding sense with the area of the brain that controls it. And there's always a biological reason. So with the skin, again, it is so you don't feel that pain of the separation. You lose cells and you become numb. And this very much resonated for me when I found out. I felt very numb for a long time. And then the second phase, so your body's always either in two phases. You're either adapting to these perceived stressors, or you are resolving the perceived stressor, or the conflict, the perceived stressor has resolved. And this is when we rebuild, repair, and we start to heal. However, in this phase is typically where we will see most symptoms. So when you're in conflict active phase, this is what they would call the sympathetic dominance. So we've experienced a stressor, we need to survive, we need to make these adaptations, we need to lose skin cells and become numb so we don't feel the pain of this conflict. And this is also the sympathetic activation where you maybe aren't sleeping as well, you're a little bit more cold, you're ruminating on the problem, you can't stop thinking about it, monkey mind. And then when we reach a resolution, so in my situation, I feel like my current boyfriend really helps to resolve a lot of these separation conflicts that I was having, because it was the first time in my life I really felt totally understood and didn't feel like someone was, just lying or wasting my time or thinking that I was a certain way to get what they wanted out of the relationship. When we first start getting in a relationship with someone, they project onto what they wish that you were, and you are doing the same back to them. So the beginning of relationships is just so amazing because you both are just assuming that this other person is all of these things you've been looking for. And then as time goes on, you realize, oh, they're actually not like this. I was just hoping and assuming they would be. It was the first time that I felt like someone was not doing that to me, that someone was actually listening there and understanding me and could relate to me and was truly someone who cared about me. And so in that resolution, what happens in the body in the healing phase, or that resolution phase, is you will start to rebuild these cells, the skin cells. And the two things that help with this are fungus and bacteria. And so you'll get eczema because the bacteria, the fungus, infections, those all help to replenish those lost cells. And every single organ and tissue has a corresponding part of the brain that kind of controls it. And the way that they discovered German New Medicine is by looking at CT scans of people who are experiencing certain types of diseases like cancers and illnesses. And they found that every person with this exact symptom had swelling or water accumulation around the exact same part of their brain. And then everyone with this symptom had swelling, water accumulation, fluid retention around another part of their brain. And so they found on these CT scans that there was measurable, scientifically sound reasons for, we need this extra fluid to help to activate this part of the brain that also corresponds to the organ to make meaningful biological adaptations to the organs so that we can either adapt to the stressor or resolve from that stressor, heal from that stressor. And so in every person that I work with in the past and from here on out, especially those with health anxiety, which is most of the people I've worked with, myself included, because we're told to fear everything. We're told to fear the food that we're eating. We're told to fear the air that we're breathing, the water that we're drinking. If we can lower that fear, because fear is going to make everything worse. If we can understand that every symptom our body is that it's happening is either an adaptation to something we are perceiving to be a stressor or a threat, or is our body resolving that exact same stressor, conflict, or threat. That takes away so much of the health anxiety because we do not need to micromanage everything that happens in our body. Yes, there are ways that we can support the way that our body handles these conflicts, but your job is always to take a deeper look at your life and to figure out those patterns. I feel like this when this happens. I was perceiving this thing that meant I was making it mean something about me, which was not true. And I can shift my perspective. And this is why some people here heal with just nervous system trauma work, nervous system regulation, German new medicine alone, because sometimes just understanding that your perception of things, the way you think of the thing in relationship to yourself is the most important aspect of how your body is responding. So if I perceive all seed oils to be incredibly toxic, every time I eat that, my body is going to respond. If I do not, yes, they're probably not made from the best resources. But am I going to get a visceral physical response to eating them or touching them? And I've also worked with so many people who will say, you know, my food sensitivities went away when I was on vacation, or my food sensitivities, I don't notice them if I'm in a really good mood and, you know, I'm distracted. But if I'm micromanaging everything that I put in my body and I'm reading the labels, I become hypersensitive and more, I have to cut out more and more things. And again, when we perceive something to be a threat to our body, to our, the way that our body works, when we perceive something to be toxic, our body will respond. Now, I'm not saying go out and eat arsenic, go out and eat rocks, right? German new medicine does not work if you were truly poisoned. And I still do believe that on some level, our world nowadays is much, much different than it was 100, 200, 300 years ago. And that we should take smart measures to prevent the exposures to certain poisons or toxicants. And we can also help to support the basic functioning of our body because these adaptations are biological and we are physical body. So we do need the physical nutrients for our body to work. So there has to be a balance between our perceptions, how we perceive things, but then also, are we getting adequate nutrition so that our body can handle the toxins that it is exposed to? But our job is to really take a look at how we're perceiving things. A lot of people will say, you know, I had this big stressor, I got sick, and then I found the holistic world where I then started to see everything as toxic and realize that I have to throw away everything that I was using. And that's probably why I got sick. And then I kept getting worse. So you can see that when you start to perceive yourself as not inherently safe, and living in a world where everything's out to be toxic and everything's making you sick, of course, your body's going to respond to that and it's going to physically respond to that. And so, yes, we need to really start to take a look at how we're perceiving things and then leave the adequate nutrition, leave the replenishing, the detoxing, either up to something that makes sense to you, like a certain type of diet that you feel good on, making sure to get the nutrition that's required to detox and for organs to function, or even through a German new medicine lens, there are certain types of conflicts which can cause changes to the way we move around nutrients and respond to nutrients, like a lot of the gut conflicts. So it may not be that you have to do all of these gut healing protocols. Maybe it's, again, coming back to the perception. And then we don't need all sorts of fancy extra stuff. Even through the lens of German new medicine, they talk about calcium being mobilized out of the bones and in certain conflicts. So German new medicine can be this map, this road map for understanding that my body is constantly adapting to the stressors that I perceive in my life. And it is also always resolving. So your body only knows adaptation and healing, adaptation and healing. So what can I do to limit the amount of perceived conflicts? Do I feel like I'm getting attacked all of the time? Do I feel like I'm trying to avoid toxins constantly? Do I tell myself, do I devalue my body by saying that I'm not a good detoxer? Do I devalue myself by saying I'm not capable of this, this, and this? I'm not good enough, therefore I have to try harder. How are our thoughts? How do we perceive ourselves, and how do we perceive the world around us? And by starting to look at those things, you will find that a lot of the micromanaging you felt like you needed to do because you thought you weren't a good detoxer or because you thought the world was toxic, you don't have to do as much. Now, I also am a big advocate for things like bioenergetic testing and mineral balancing, simply because they will help to show what organs and what adaptations are being made, so we can get really specific for where we look for these conflicts and these perceived stressors. And also because, again, you can support your body when it's going through a healing phase. We can use homeopathy that target specific systems or tissues that can help lower the amount of excess symptoms that you may be experiencing, but also while trusting that our body is going to resolve this, because we're already in the healing phase. We've resolved that. Now, there is such a thing called a hanging healing, which is when the conflicts get re-triggered and continue to go into conflict active and then healing phase. So you continue to get triggered by the original perceived stressor, and then you resolve it, but then it comes up again, and you resolve it, it comes up again. And that's how we can get into chronic symptoms that last years and years and years. Or if you resolve something that was a very long conflict active phase for you, like in the situation where I met my current boyfriend, that conflict active phase where I felt isolated and alone, and like I couldn't talk to anyone, and that nobody understood me in my romantic relationships, that went on for decades. So the healing phase was many years. I am 6 years out from that original conflict resolution, and I am mostly resolved, but that took a very, very long time. And I did 1,000,001 things to try and help resolve it from a physical standpoint. But it wasn't really until I started working on the nervous system, the somatics, starting to see the patterns in my life and how I was perceiving things, that it really started to shift. And there were some physical things that I did that helped, absolutely. But the resolution has to come from your perception of yourself in relationship to the world, and vice versa. And so I'm going to go ahead and end this here, but I just want to give you a little taste of the type of inner work that kind of goes into resolution of health anxiety, resolution of the chronic illness or the holistic illness wheel, the functional medicine wheel, just like we get into the Western medicine wheel where we're a patient for life. we can also feel like that in the holistic world, you know. I'm over 6 years out from getting sick, and there's still things that I'm like, oh, I want to try that. Oh, I want to try that. And even though there are many, many things that have helped and that I will continue to recommend and do, we always have to start with taking a look at our perceptions and our emotional state. And, in the nervous system regulation world, we say things like do breath work, go outside, be in nature. And those things absolutely help because they lower the amount of stress in our body. However, if we don't look at how we are thinking, how we are perceiving everything in our lives, those things will only move the needle so far. Anything that excludes you doing the inner work to literally change who you are, how you think of things, how you think of yourself, will only get you so far. And so if this was helpful for you, please give me a follow, add me as a subscription on YouTube. We can work together one-on-one. We can also, you can find me at thehealerrevolution.com. I have quite a few different courses, as well as quite a few different offerings for either one-on-one work or group coaching. Currently, I have a course called Feel to Heal, and this one is a very affordable course on my 5-step processing technique that I have developed and pulled from all different aspects of mind, body type healing, as well as German new medicine, as well as several other different modalities. And in this 5-step process, it teaches you how to ask questions, how to find some of your limiting beliefs and perceptions that may be perpetuating some of these conflicts. And then also it helps you to process the emotions, the sensations, and desensitize the nervous system response from the trigger. So it does have a little bit of the like EMDR reprocessing techniques in there. But I teach this because you can do this stuff yourself. You can do this a couple times a week, every day. You can use bits and pieces of the 5-step process. And I also offer group coaching through the course, as well as in my private practice, for only $50 a month right now. So it is very cheap. And in about 3 months, we're going to increase the price. So for $50 a month, it's a steal. 3 coaching sessions a month. 4th week is off. And again, just DM me, let me know if you have any questions on this topic. And thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.